Are you considering defecting to Reform UK, as one of our Tony in Liverpool just suggested?
No, I proudly joined the Conservative Party at the age of 18 years old. Actually, I signed up on the day of my birthday as if I was a Premier League footballer, signed their first contract, which shows how tragic I am. So proud to be a member of the Conservative Party, and fighting within, obviously, to make sure we have those strong Conservative values and make sure that there is a real difference between us and the Labour Party in the next general election. So voters like Tony feel that they can put their vote safely with the Conservatives.
There it is. Well, I mean, what you're saying might appeal to a lot of people listening, but Downing Street aren't particularly enamoured. They're rejecting your proposals.
Well, I've not had any direct contact with Downing Street and hope that we can enter into some meaningful conversations about the ideas. Ultimately, some of these can be enacted very quickly and others can go into the Conservative Party manifesto. And ultimately what we're saying here is that we had a manifesto pledge that we were all elected on in 2019, which is to keep migration at the very highest, around the levels that they were in 2019, which is around 216,000. But we want them to be much, much lower. And as you've been talking about, rightly so, you have 30,000 BTEC students studying health and social care. We have 5 million economically inactive people. If just 12% of those went into health and social care themselves, we wouldn't need to pull on the lever of foreign workers in order to fill those vacancies. So ultimately, we have solutions with our country. It's about actually making the supply side reforms and the employers themselves making the jobs attractive with the pay and working conditions, as we saw with the HGV shortage not long ago, that will mean that we can fill these jobs within.
You've got a 12-point plan. The idea is to cut immigration by 400,000. I think I've got that right, Jonathan. I mean, it's a bold plan. It's ambitious. Can it be done before the next election?
Well, I certainly think it can. I mean, the care workers scheme is a temporary visa scheme introduced during the pandemic. We, of course, would make that gradual, but ultimately those numbers are obviously high, particularly when we've got 80,000 visas handed out, and around 51% of those, if I remember correctly, are actually for dependents, not for care workers themselves. So there's a real question mark about that. And ultimately, other schemes about dependents for university students. Look, we want foreign students to come to this country and study at our world-leading university institutions. These are something that we should celebrate. But you don't need to bring your entire family over in order to be able to do that. It wouldn't happen in any other country, so why should it happen in the United Kingdom? And as well as obviously looking at how the Migrationary Board, instead of just looking at GDP, which, by the way, the Bank of England themselves have said a 10% increase in migration will see a 2% drop in wages in semi-skilled and unskilled services sectors. Actually, we should also be looking at the impact on housing, for example. If migration carries on as it is, we need 616,000 more houses per year, as the Centre for Policy Studies said. The GP services, we've had to get 7 million more GP vacancies in the system from 2010 to 2020 because of immigrants alone. Ultimately, these public services need to be funded by the British taxpayer, and we need to have a way forward and making sure that immigration is done in a sensible and controlled way while skilling up our workforce and making those jobs attractive. And as you say, moving away from this gold standard of university being the be-all and end-all. Vocational qualifications are the way forward. I'm absolutely convinced of that, and I'm going to be working with Leah Nietzsche MP for Grimsby to actually write a paper for the New Conservatives with ideas of how we can improve vocational and further education and get the balance right between funding and alongside higher education as well.
Do you sense, though, Jonathan, we lost a lot of care workers during COVID. There were many reasons for that. Obviously, there were many that didn't have the vaccination. They were told they can't work in care homes, etc. So there was that, but also we know that lockdown sort of recalibrated some people's expectations and ideas of what they wanted to do. And for many, it was a very simple case of saying, do you know what, this job, the hourly rate, I might as well deliver Amazon parcels for this without any of the stress, and it's an emotional job as well as anything else. So it's not just a case of getting Brits to take up domestic roles, whether it's in care, whether it's in any other profession. It's about making sure that we offer good wages, isn't it, and good conditions.
Well, absolutely. As I said, the HGV driver shortage didn't end up needing immigration to solve that. What happened was the government improved access to training and sped up testing. Employers then increased their wages and obviously extras that come on the side of that. And suddenly, lo and behold, we fill those driver shortages. And I say this as someone whose grandfather was a long-distance lorry driver for most of his professional career. It's a great profession, something that we should be rewarding and making important to people to want to be in. And employers should be paying the wages and have the working conditions that are attractive. Of course, people need to understand reality, that you can't all in every job work from home. Flexible hours, are not possible in every job either. And as much as we all want that, and some people may even want a 4-day working week, I'm sure we'd all love that in theory, but reality and theory are two very different things. And ultimately, what we want to do is, like you say, make these professions worthwhile, but also understand there is a vocational element as well. I spent 8 years as a secondary school teacher in state schools before entering Parliament. Yes, it was hard work. Yes, I did a lot more hours than what I was technically paid for, but it was also a vocation. I chose to go into that profession because I wanted to give young people back every life opportunity and advantage that I was very fortunate to have myself. And so I think there has to be that element as well in the thought process for people, that they're giving back to society, and ultimately they hope to be on the receiving end of it as they get older.
How do we get these people, Jonathan, into these professions, whether we are talking the care sector, whether it's hospitality, coffee shops, even parking wardens, these areas where typically you see a disproportionate representation of foreign workers? How do you make that switch? That surely isn't the work of a moment.
No, so look, the lifelong learning entitlement, where anyone without a level 3 qualification can now get one for free, I think is something that's really exciting, and we need to be expanding that. And actually, I think putting flexibility in place so that local areas can choose the type of subjects that suit the working needs for their local area year in, year out. I also think that what we need to see as well is that BTEC and T-level qualifications, actually that vocational training in the workforce, making sure that people are getting that work experience so they can see the reality on the ground, mentally prepare them for it. But ultimately, what we also need to do is tell those people who are economically inactive, those people who can work but are choosing not to work, that ultimately their benefits will be turned off if they do not go into the workforce. You do not have a right to be on the receiving end of hard-earned British taxpayers' money for just dossing around. You have to get up and go to work. That is the way it's always been and should be. And ultimately, people shouldn't just be able to lap money up for no reason. There are some people with physical ailments and some people with mental health problems who are unable to work. I totally understand. And they can play an important role in some part in our voluntary sector. Yeah. But those people without those physical and mental illnesses or disabilities should be in work and should be told if you don't go to work, the tap turns off.
Why is the government not adopting so? A lot of what you're saying, many people are contacting us saying this all makes perfect sense, perfect common sense. Why would the government not say, well, yeah, let's get these guys into the room? The new Conservative, it sounds a bit like New Labour, Jonathan. Is this the big plan?
No, I'm certainly not trying to be Tony Blair or Gordon Brown. God help me. Look, Rishi Sunak has got his government and chose it. Look, he sadly chose to let me go when he came into power. I'm using my mouth on the backbenches proudly to espouse the views of the local people in Stoke-on-Trent, North Gisgrove and
But you disagree with the government, right? You fundamentally disagree with the government's current policy on immigration. You clearly don't believe it goes far enough.
No, I think the government is actually looking at illegal migration mainly, which I think is doing everything right, and it has my full support in that regard. In fact, they adopted some of the amendments that myself and Danny Kruger and others put forward to the illegal migration bill. But I think that it's easy to get distracted by illegal migration. Ultimately, legal migration, that's 600,000 who came here obviously through legal routes. Yeah. That's something that we need to challenge. And one simple thing is, let's raise the minimum earning threshold from the 28,000 to 38,000, which could reduce, I think, around 50,000 people already, because ultimately what we want is high-skilled, high-wage labour coming into this country if we need to use it at all.
Sure. Have you got any support in Cabinet that you know of? Any off-the-record comments from Cabinet when you're there in Stranger's Bar having a pint of speckled hen in the evening? Any of them said to you, do you know what, Jonathan, we're secretly with you?
Well, Ian, first of all, I would only ever drink Titanic Brewery's Fine Plum Porter, which is a Stoke-on-Trent, North Gisgrove and Talk brewer.
Why not?
Secondly, I've become a boring teetotaler since November 2021, so it'll be an orange juice and lemonade for me. And number 3, I'm up in Stoke-on-Trent at the moment, so I haven't had a chance to bend the ear of Cabinet colleagues, but rest assured I'll be back next week, and I'm looking forward to twisting their arm and having a good conversation.